Thanks so much for joining this evening, everyone. We're just letting a couple of minutes pass just to let anybody who's just getting into their teams now to join, and then we'll get started. Okay. I think we'll maybe just make a start, because I'm aware it's everybody's precious time in the evening. I want to be respectful of that. People may continue to join as the session progresses, but I'll just say off the bat that this is being recorded, so if anyone comes in halfway, they'll be able to catch up. But yeah, first of all, like I said, thanks so much for joining this evening. This is the Community Pharmacy Scotland Ask Me Anything webinar, and we're going to be specifically focusing on the Public Health Service Smoking Cessation Varenicline PGD tonight. So hopefully this can be informative for you, and as per the title, there will be a large section of the time tonight where it'll be open for you guys to ask questions that you may have. So we will run through a short presentation to begin with, and then open it up to questions later on. So I'm just going to get started. So quickly, I'm just going to run through what tonight's session is going to contain. So we'll do a quick round of introductions, because I'm aware you may not know who we all are, so it'd be good to get names before we get started. We'll go through some general housekeeping. We'll then do an overview of the relaunch of the PGD, available resources which you can use to support your learning and service delivery. We'll then open it up to questions where we'll hopefully be able to give you answers, and then we'll close. And time depending, the session's open till 9 o'clock, but if we round up before then you guys can get some time back in your evening, as obviously the nights stretch long now, so want to maximise that if we can. Okay, so I'll start off. Hello, my name's Sarah. I work in the policy department at Community Pharmacy Scotland, and I will be leading tonight's session. With me, I have got my policy panel, who I'll let introduce themselves, but we also have a guest speaker tonight, and that's Catherine Aglin, who is from the Pharmacy and Medicines Policy Division within Scottish Government. So I'll let Catherine do a wee introduction as well, but I'm just going to pass over. I'm going to go through who's showing on my screen in order for them to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Adam.
Hi everyone, I'm Adam Osprey. I'm the Head of Policy and Development at CPS, supporting Sarah this evening.
Okay, Jill.
Hi everyone, I'm Jill. I'm also part of the policy team at CPS. I joined in September.
Jill. Gordon.
Hi, I'm Gordon Winter. I'm Policy and Development Officer at CPS, and joined the team just shortly before Jill last summer.
Thanks, Gordon. Robbie, do you want to come in? You're on mute.
There's always one. I'm Robbie Collins. I'm Digital Communication Officer here at CPS, and I am tech support tonight. So if you need anything, just let us know.
And Brian.
Thanks. I'm Brian. I'm the Operations Manager here, and I'm here to support the communications team.
Thanks, Brian. And Catherine.
Hi there, I'm Catherine Aglin. As Sarah said, I sit with the Pharmacy and Medicines Division in Scottish Government. I also, part of my role, sits with the Professional Development Team, so I'm a Principal Lead in the Professional Development Team in NES, and I'm also still a practicing community pharmacist, so a few hats or plates spinning.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing that. Okay, so we'll move on to housekeeping. Robbie, are you okay to cover this part?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to let you know, we've got the cameras and microphones disabled tonight. That's just so we can hear Sarah and the rest of the policy team clearly. If you do have any technical issues, the chat function is there for you to let us know of any technical issues. If it's also there for any questions that you have. So if you've got questions right now, please pop them in. I will grab them and send them to the policy team. I just want to let you know, Sarah has already mentioned this, the session is being recorded. So that will be sent out on Friday, by the way. That's everything from me. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Robbie. That's great. So yes, so we will open to questions once the initial presentation is complete, but please feel free to fire questions into the chat, as Robbie said, throughout the session, in case anything that we're going to cover in the next couple of slides triggers any questions that you may have. Once the question session then opens, myself and the policy panel, including Catherine, will then work through those questions to get you some answers. Okay, so moving on. So yes, like I've said, we're here to do an overview of the Public Health Service Smoking Cessation Varenicline PGD. This is a community pharmacy service which has been relaunched as of April 2025. The PGD has been nationally signed off by NHS 24 currently and now sits with NHS boards waiting for local sign-off. So it may not be a PGD that is live as of yet in your health board, but if it's not live as of yet, it will certainly be on its way to you. So tonight we're just looking to do an overall coverage of the service and the PGD, and hopefully this covers some of the questions that you may have, but also helps to just refresh those people's brains who have definitely provided what would have been the Champix service previously, but also give plenty of information and support to those who have possibly never provided the service before, if you've been newly qualified, for example, since Champix was no longer on the market. So hopefully this session covers both thresholds of experience. Now I'm going to pass on to Catherine as she's going to do the first couple of slides for us.
Thank you, Sarah. So Sarah asked me to come along tonight because we thought it might be helpful just to put things in a bit of context where the Varenicline PGD is come from. So back in 2023, Adam and I both sat on a working group that looked at reviewing smoking cessation services in Scotland, and that resulted in a publication of the report, as you can see on the screen. So if you've not seen it, it's maybe worth going to have a look. And from the community pharmacy aspect of it, really the ambition that came out of it was to improve recruitment, retention and successful quits in community pharmacy. Can I get the next slide, Robbie, please? Thank you. So a little bit more detail of objectives that came out of it. So it was to review the national service specification and then develop a condensed set of core requirements. So for any of you that have looked at the service spec in the past, it's quite wordy at the moment. So that was certainly something to look at reviewing. And in that, we're looking at sort of referrals to and from boards, how you might do shared care between pharmacy and other settings, looking at the data recording and the carbon monoxide monitoring. Obviously, during COVID, carbon monoxide monitoring was off the cards because of the risk of COVID, but that has since been reintroduced. Second objective was to look at the existing training that was there and develop sort of core training and perhaps national peer group training for staff involved in smoking cessation. So being mindful that community pharmacy, you do lots of other things and not just smoking cessation. So it was really important that we make sure the training is fit for purpose for community pharmacy. The smoking cessation advisors, obviously that is their day job, so they can go into an awful lot more detail usually, and their training program is much sort of much more in depth. But the community pharmacy one will be able to support you guys to deliver the service. And the third one there, I think everybody at some point has maybe complained about PCR. So we looked at, or are looking at PCR to see if there's any way we can improve it to make it slightly more usable, and therefore help you record your work that you're doing, so to make sure that you get paid appropriately. Next slide, please, Robbie. So where we've got to, we are, I suppose I now sit on this group of what they've called a FACT, so I think it's Public Health Action Team. So there's quite a few different work streams, and there's a smoking cessation subgroup, and within that there's a pharmacy work stream. There's also a maternity, a data, a training, a vaping. I have to look at my list. There's an NHS 24 strand, there's a health promotion strand, and there's a strand looking at the service specification for the smoking cessation advisors. So, but the pharmacy sits very much as distinct sections, so that we can concentrate on making it right for this cohort. As Sarah mentioned, the National Varenicline PGD, so historically the Champix one there was a national template which was then sort of adapted locally for boards, but since that was in place, I suppose the way that we do national PGDs has changed, and now that there's a national template that all boards will follow, it goes through a national governance programme through NHS 24, and then because the boards are the legally accountable entity, that has to go through local governance procedures. So that's where it'll be with most people. If it's not out yet, that's where it'll be, and it'll be coming very soon. In all honesty, I hadn't necessarily anticipated doing Varenicline at this time, because the ideal would have been looking at the whole section and the whole programme, and then all being launched together. However, it's really important that because Varenicline's back on the market, that pharmacy teams have an option to supply it. So it was prioritised in the middle of last year to make sure that we could get that up and running as soon as we can. If you've not seen it already, there was a circular released which gives you a draft copy of the PGD. So it will allow you to have a look at it. It will be exactly the same as what the board will put out, but it won't have all the signatures on it. The one that you need to look with all the boards, your local board signatures, and the authorisation form that you need to complete for your boards, local boards governance processes as well. So to actually be able to sign yourself off and deliver the PGD, you need the board one, but the circular has the draft one, which, as I say, is 99.9% identical. So you can have a look at that. That also has the link to the updated training. So at the moment, the training module, that's all the smoking cessation training that's available. So there is a bit that looks a bit about the sort of the policy and the theory of it, I suppose. And it does talk a little bit about NRT, but the bulk of it is about Varenicline to enable you to be able to deliver that service. As we go on, so we've got, I say, we've got a short life working group with representatives from CPS, from Scottish Government, from the primary care leads, from some pharmacists that are actually delivering the service, and among others, we are looking at the service specification and how we can revise it to make it a little bit more straightforward. And so from that, it's likely that there will be a further modification to the training that's available, and we will. The aspiration is to have a bit about sort of subsections, so looking a bit about the policy and why smoking cessation is important, and the implications of people not stopping to smoke. It'll look a little bit about some of the behavioural stuff, so part of the service is very much about the behavioural support that you can give customers. So we'll look a little bit more about in detail of that, how you can best support them. We'll look about the medication options. So there's obviously the Varenicline element, there'll be NRT looked at as well. And then there'll be a bit about the mechanics of how do you get paid properly. So there'll be about the PCR, and hopefully that will make it really straightforward and easy to put the process claim through. So it says there, I've got NEST team updating the training. So my colleague Peter Hamilton in the NEST professional development team is helping to lead that, and we've got a couple of pharmacists who are heavily involved in smoking cessation services and GG&C board to help us develop some of that training. So the aspiration is that by this time next year, the entire revised service spec will be out. If all goes to plan. So I suppose just keep an eye out for it, but at least now you've got the the Varenicline stuff is here to get you started. So, and that's probably all I need to say, Sarah. Thank you.
Great, Catherine. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I can see in the chat that there's been some issues around seeing the slides, but for those who are maybe still having problems seeing the slides, Robbie has now sent the presentation in the chat, so you can follow along with that presentation. We're now moving from slide 8 to slide 9, just so people can get an idea of where we're at. Okay, so Catherine's covered a whole host there, which is really great. Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to quickly go over the relaunch section again. So this is an updated PGD that has been developed nationally to replace the original PGD that was in place for Champix, as Catherine said. As Varenicline is a prescription-only medicine, you will know a PGD is required to enable community pharmacists to supply it through the National Community Pharmacy Smoking Cessation Service. An updated training is now available, which we are going to highlight in one of the later on slides. It's also in the PGD as well. It's been developed based on previous local versions, but with additional information on renal issues and psychiatric conditions, because we know that in the past with the Champix PGD there was some exclusion and restrictions around those issues, but again that's explained in much more detail within the PGD and the supporting training that NES have pulled together for that. Now, at present, the community pharmacy smoking cessation service remains only available to those who are attempting to quit tobacco smoking. So at the minute, it doesn't cover those who are vaping as well. But as Catherine said, there's a whole host of work underway to potentially develop that support service further for those that vape. And for the last couple of years, community pharmacies have been limited to only supplying nicotine replacement therapy as a pharmaceutical aid, in addition to that behavioural support for those wishing to stop smoking. However, with Varenicline now being available and returned to the market, providing these community pharmacy services will give people that additional treatment option again, which will be great. So the service itself, it's for those wishing to use Varenicline as a treatment option under the Community Pharmacy Smoking Cessation Service. We've had a couple of questions in already around, do people already need to have used NRT prior to being able to access the Varenicline PGD? The answer to that is no. If somebody would like to try this as a first port of call, then that is fine. There's no sort of two-step process where they need to try patches and other products first. Varenicline should be supplied weekly as part of the service, along with the motivational support for the individual. And again, to go back to what Catherine was saying, that training to be able to provide that behavioural and motivational support is all included within your NEST URAS module, and having gone through it myself prior to this presentation, it is really good, and there's lots of useful bits and pieces in there that will be able to support you, to support your patients. Smoking status should be confirmed and checked each week. And this can be done through the use of a smoking cessation CO2 monitor, which determines the smoking status. Every community pharmacy should have one of these. However, if you don't, please contact your local smoking cessation facilitator, and they should be able to provide you further assistance with this. Pharmacists should complete the individual authorisation form contained within the PGD. And this needs to be submitted to your relevant NHS board prior to using the PGD. This authorisation form can be found within the Annex 1 of the PGD, and it also includes the details of where specifically you need to send those forms as per your health board as well. Now, just a wee bit of an extra comment at the bottom there, food for thought, I guess. Community pharmacy can be the agent for change for people's health by engaging with smokers, helping them understand what is required from them, providing effective pharmacological and behavioural support and encourage them to overcome their addiction to nicotine. So I guess what we're trying to say there is this service doesn't just need to be a case of somebody coming in asking to access it. You can be proactive within your teams as well to identify people that you may think would be suitable for the service and provide them that support to help get started on their journey. Now, the PGD, went one too far there, sorry. The PGD itself, it authorises community pharmacists to supply Varenicline tablets to patients aged 18 and over who meet the PGD inclusion criteria. And this PGD currently is written where there is no delegation at present. So what I mean by that is it is still exclusively the pharmacist that needs to carry out the service and the documentation and the consultation involved. As Catherine has mentioned, there is a whole body of work going on to review the wider smoke cessation programme, and with that it'll be looking at including the likes of pharmacy technicians to be able to support these services as well in the future, but currently there is no delegation under this Varenicline PGD. All patients must be registered with a GP in Scotland. Again, we've had a couple of questions around that because we know that obviously the inclusion criteria for the likes of NHS Pharmacy First Scotland can be slightly different, I should say. However, for this particular PGD, the patient must be registered with a GP within Scotland. And that's so that a notification of supply can be sent by the pharmacist to the GP following assessment under the PGD, and that's whether a supply is made or whether the patient has been determined to not be suitable for the service at this point in time. So looking at the duration of the service, so typically it lasts 12 weeks. And this includes a 1-week titration period at the start. Now, the initiation titration period requires a 2-week supply to be provided to avoid splitting the initiation packs. In the TURAS training module, it does clearly state following initial supply of the titration pack, the pharmacist should provide further supplies then on a weekly basis. But that first 2 weeks should be given as one whole pack. I'm going to move on to this next slide because it might be a bit confusing what I'm talking about if you've never seen a titration Varenicline pack before, but this is an infographic that's been taken from the TIVA website. And if we look down at the dosing table at the bottom here, you'll see week 1, and there is day 1 to day 3, 1 0.5 milligram taken, 1 milligram tablet taken once a day, which then moves up to 1 0.5 milligram tablet taken twice a day for day 4 to 7. And then moving on to week 2, you have your day 1 to day 7 moving up to the 1 milligram tablet twice a day. So when we talk about a titration pack, we're talking about these first 2 weeks where the dosing changes and the patient progresses up strength of the medication. So in order to support the patient and to avoid splitting packs unnecessarily, this whole titration pack should be given as a single 2-week supply to begin with. Hopefully that that infographic helps to explain that slightly further. So moving on to the PMR and PCR, so these are your two modules that will support you to deliver the service. Now, supplies of Varenicline must be recorded via the UCF module on your PMR. And it's worth noting at this point that as part of your dispensing process, you should be labelling the Varenicline within your PMR based on the physical stock that you're supplying. So to give an example of that, if you have ordered stock from Alliance, for example, it should be the Alliance option on your PMR that you are picking to label the product and to send an electronic claim. We have CPS has sent out communication on this just yesterday. Robbie, I think you were going to link that website article in the chat tonight for everyone that's possibly not had a chance to see it yet, but that just gives you a little bit more information around that, and it's all to do with Varenicline currently not being a Part 7 line in the drug tariff, but hopefully that guidance helps to support you to understand the best way to claim your Varenicline. Now, follow-up and smoking status should be carried out at weeks 4 and weeks 12 and recorded on the PCR. And good practice looks like weekly recording on the PCR of this service, as this ensures a sound audit trail and a comprehensive clinical record. So it's really important to try and get into that routine of using the PCR simultaneously with your PMR, so that your recording is matched to both of those electronic records. For the actual service itself, the payments that you can receive for delivering the service are triggered through your PCR, and this is at week 0, 4 and 12. However, reimbursement for the item that you supply, this happens through your PMR UCF claim. So it's maybe a good time for you to take away the point of thinking about how you can include the PCR recording as part of your operational processes, and what good housekeeping looks like in terms of that. So we've now listed the available resources here, broken it into 2 sections. You've got your compulsory training, so these are, well, this particular one is your CHURAS module, which has been redeveloped by NES recently to support this service. This is compulsory training and can be accessed through your CHURAS Learn portal. For those pharmacists who have previously completed the Varenicline compulsory training, then you only need to redo the self-assessment at the end of the module. Providing you pass this and you have a sound understanding of Varenicline, there is no need to go through the entire module again. However, all pharmacists will need to read through the new PGD and sign it off before undertaking the service. Also, keep an eye out for any health board specific training that may come up. This can be viewed via your community pharmacy NHS website, the portal for your particular health board, but I'm sure if anything like that does come up in your local area, you would be notified by your health board team. And there's some additional support materials there as well, which can be useful as you grow in confidence with the service. Now, that's taken approximately half an hour, which is what I had intended for, so I'm glad we've been able to keep to some time frame so far. We'll now open it up to questions. I can hear, I don't have the chat on my screen currently because I was focusing on giving that presentation, but I've been hearing the sound of all the questions coming through in the chat, so that's a good sign. So we'll now open up to addressing some of those questions for you, and I will hand over to whoever's got the first one. Adam.
Yep, thanks, Sarah. So that'll be me. 2 people asking the same question. That's around about whether this new PGD supports pharmacy technician colleagues to undertake the Varenicline assessments and then the supply of medication. The short answer on that is no, not at the moment. CPS and I believe Scottish Government are fully supportive of our pharmacy technician colleagues starting to get involved in PGD use. However, although it's technically now legal to do that, there are a couple of steps that will need to happen, not just for Varenicline, for all the PGDs that we use before that can actually happen in day-to-day practice. So we'll need to get a strategic policy decision by the commissioners, so that would be in the main for National Services, Scottish Government. But then if you look at this from a legal perspective, each health board issues its own PGD, so they would also need to make a decision that that was something they wanted to support. We're also going to need to look at what are actually an assessment of the training needs of the pharmacy technician population, and that'll both be on each specific topic, and then also in things like consultation skills, if that's not something that every pharmacy technician colleague out there is used to doing. If there are any differences in the existing materials that are out there already and what is identified as being the needs, then there'll need to be adjustments made, or separate materials perhaps produced, separate courses, and then released and quality assured and gone through, and I'm sure our colleagues at NEST would support us with that. So a good couple of things there, and then what we'll need to look at is the actual PGDs themselves would need to be amended and reissued, but that's probably the smallest technical part. And then of course you've got each of the employers having to have a think about, what does this actually mean for me? How do I support my pharmacy technicians to be able to do this? But also, what are the other considerations that I might need to think about? Things like, does that have any impact on indemnity insurance and various bits and bobs like that? So we're a little way away from that for NHS services, but the will is absolutely there to support that.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, Gordon, do you want to come in?
Declan's come on and said the Shetland PG is yet to be confirmed. However, they are talking about having a titration period at the end as well as the start. Would this also be covered in the PGD? Yes, it would have to be the PGD, which Catherine mentioned before, is the draft version, and the final versions will be controlled at health board level. So if Shetland choose to do that, then they should be able to. But now I'm a bit nervous about that answer because Catherine's got her hand up. So I shall pass over to the expert. I think she might want to come in here. So
yeah,
Catherine.
so to be honest, that's the first time I've heard of that being maybe an option. So Gordon's right in that the local boards do have the ability to tweak it, but the idea that it is a national service and there's quite a lot of consultation goes into it before it gets to the point of sign off. So the aspiration is that it is the same, because actually from a pharmacist perspective, we've got people working lengths and breadths of the country, so they might be in GDC one day and maybe get flown up to Shetland to do locums the next day. So it's much better if it's consistent. So just keep an eye on the detail, and that's maybe I can pick something up with the Shetland guys just to see what they're thinking. And certainly if because when you look in some of the detail of what is good practice for smoking cessation, then titration, it might be an option. And there was another question about, I think in the chat, about longer than 12 weeks. So again, the PGD really is just, and the pharmacy service specification is just for 12 weeks. So maybe that's where, certainly in the short term, you'd be better getting your local smoking cessation service involved, and they could perhaps support that if the patient is needing a longer a longer period. But again, that's all something that potentially we can look at as part of the bigger review to perhaps make amends as time goes on, depending on what we find out. So I'm just looking to see. So Diane said that the Shetland's in the North of Scotland group and it's been signed off as it came out nationally. So unless Shetland are doing something differently. So at the end of the day, it's the local board that's going to sign it, and you as a pharmacist are signing the board you're working in. So make sure that you look at the specific PGD in a bit of detail. Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine and Gordon. I am going to then pass over to Jill, as you've had your hand up for a while.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, this is just a comment that's come in about the carbon monoxide readings and that they haven't been using this since COVID. We were advised all machines would need recalibrated before using again. Do we think this is still the case? So yes, I would imagine that is still the case. I know there's been some comments as well to say that new monitors have been issued, and other comments to say that they are now being recalibrated regularly. So yes, the answer to that.
Thanks, Jill. Adam, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. I've got two in quick succession. So the first one came in from a friend of the podcast, as they say, from Sandra Robertson, who's asking around about, do we need to record the brand of Varenicline? So yeah, we've actually put out communication on this just very recently. So for those of you who like the technical detail, Varenicline is obviously now available generically. It is not, however, in Part 7 of the tariff. So how you process the item on your PMR as you're labelling it up matters. The advice there is to make sure that you're selecting the product that appears on your PMR and picking the wholesaler that you got it from, or the brand that you've got in your hand, because there are two different prices that are available, which is perfectly fine because that's what they're available at in the different wholesalers. It's a medicines market, but to make sure you get paid back appropriately and accurately for what it is that you bought in, make sure that you are picking the line on your PMR that is where you got it from the wholesaler, and that is just the same as any non-Part 7 line if you are processing a prescription for something else. So that was the first one, and if you have a look in your inboxes for the communication that we sent out around about that, and Robbie has just very helpfully popped the link in the chat there around about the article that's on the website about it too. The second question that's come in is around about asking from Stella whether the smoking cessation support referrals will be able to suggest Varenicline, and that's obviously down to the pharmacist that's supplying. And what about the hospital referrals or card? Now that is where that very much lives locally, so that's around about shared care situations that are put in place. So not every board has these, and the board that does have the boards that do have shared care arrangements between effectively health board quit your way teams or hospitals and community pharmacy have bespoke setups, and I would very much encourage you to get in touch with your local quit your way team or indeed your primary care community pharmacy lead to understand precisely how that works and what the expectations are around about this service. Catherine, I don't know if you've got any more to say around about that, but I think the answer to that question definitely lives locally.
Definitely at the moment. I think, as I say, the aspiration would be to support somebody who wants to stop smoking right through to the point of them stopping smoking completely, and it probably does need a little bit of teamwork. So that's certainly something as part of the bigger review over the next 6 to 9 months we'll be looking at to see how we can maybe set up more formal channels. Again, because there's different boards, it might be slightly different in each board, but the principle, hopefully we can get agreement of the principle of it. So that will hopefully come in the future.
Great, thank you. Jill, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to come in off the back of that. We've got another question here. Just wanted to check with you, Catherine and Adam. Should shared care also be following weekly supply? Often come under pressure to supply more than 1 week.
So again, that goes down to local. That falls out with what the service specification asks you to do. Your quit your way guys in the local boards are specialists, however, so it may well be something to do with the patient and what they need or what is the best for them to give them the best chance at stopping smoking. So again, that's got to lie between your professional decision making and your local service. Of course, if it's something that completely crosses the terms and the dotting the i's and crossing the t's of the PGD, then you'd have to have that conversation with them locally to see what was the best case forward. I think we always need to bear in mind though that each patient's going to be different, and sometimes there'll need to be slight adjustments to what it is that we do to give them what it is they need to quit successfully.
Yeah, that's great, Adam. Thank you. Thanks, Jill. Okay, just having a wee look at the other questions coming through. So I have one here. So Danilo, you've asked if the PGD covers 1 milligram tablets twice a day up to the end of the 12-week period, reducing the dose in the last 2 weeks with an inverted titration pack would be okay, ? Well, I think Catherine's basically already covered that in her previous response to, things like that lying out with the national PGD. So from a clinical point of view, wouldn't be able to comment, but we're here to discuss the components of the national PGD at the minute, and if there was any variation, that would be up to your health board. And as Catherine said, she'll link in with any health boards that are maybe looking to do something slightly different, because we are aiming for a national approach with this. So yeah. Adam?
Thanks, Sarah. So I see Alistair has asked us to clarify the claim of the Varenicline I was talking about just a minute ago. So asking whether we claim the brand dispensed or whether it's the wholesaler you bought it from. So the details in the article that we've put in there. Now, where we got to that advice from was Sarah and I and our colleague Radek, who's one of our excellent data analysts, had a look through recent GP10 dispensing and claiming and payment data, and what we tracked through in the rule that we saw is where a lot of the claims were getting made and paid correctly, where it looks like the PMR allows you to claim with a DMND code that is, for example, Alliance or AAH, and that results in accurate payment, assuming that's where you got the stock from. If you pick the line that's got TIVA because you've got TIVA in your hand as well, then that also leads to the correct payment there. So yeah, Alistair, it would be along ideally the wholesaler you're buying it from. If your PMR doesn't allow for that, then go for the branded line and not the original brand unless it somehow becomes available again.
Thanks, Adam. Gordon?
Yep. One's come through. If a patient's attempt to stop smoking with NRT is unsuccessful, can we start a new attempt with Varenicline immediately? You need to close off the initial attempt. That's the first thing. You can't have two attempts open at the same time, and you could start again. But the question you would kind of be asking as a health professional is, are they motivated at this point? What was the factors that made them fail with NRT, and are they motivated to stop at this point? And you do have that time frame as well, where you've got your pre-quit attempt as well to think about. So yes, you could start again as a brand new attempt, but you would be kind of questioning where the motivation is and how it would be different this time as opposed to the NRT. Despite the fact that Varenicline has been shown to be more effective, the motivation is gonna, you can't do one without the other really. You need the motivation as well. So that would certainly be a conversation to have, I think.
Yep. That's great, Gordon. Thank you. I have had another one come in here. Do pharmacists always have to wait for GP approval after sending the GP notification form? So I assume you mean wait as in wait to make a supply? No, that's not the case. There are some criteria that you need to consider, but if the patient is, basically filling all the inclusion criteria in, and you have no concerns clinically, professionally, then as long as you're sending the GP notification to notify them that the patient is starting that treatment, but no, you don't necessarily have to wait. However, if there was a more complex case, or you were unsure, then at that point you would obviously make the professional decision to hold off from making a supply until you've maybe had that conversation. But the notification form is to notify. Okay, Adam, sorry you've had your hand up for a wee minute there. Do you want to come in?
Yep, no problem. So the question I've had in is around about whether, excuse me, Varenicline, because the evidence is suggesting it's similar to, if not slightly superior to combination NRT, whether it is first line or not. And the answer to that is if you refer to your local health board formulary, I know a number of them have got Varenicline as joint first line. So you see that in, I think, Glasgow, certainly Lothian as well, and the bigger boards have got that there. So yeah, it's then down to individual patient preference. So I would probably say, on reflection, compared to having been around when the original PGD came out, as all these things are a bit scary when they come out and new, it's definitely, I think the idea is that it's to be used a great deal more.
Thank you. Catherine?
It was just going back to the previous question about the notification form. The only exception where you would want to be able to speak to the prescriber before supplying is if the patient's taking clozapine. So because clozapine is a pretty complicated medication, that when I spoke to the mental health pharmacist specialist interest group, they were quite clear that for clozapine patients, they should be making every attempt to get hold of the prescriber before the actual supply, just so that they're aware, so that their clozapine levels can be monitored properly, and yes, just make it as safe as possible. So everything else, yes, it's a notification form, but clozapine, they should be in touch with the prescriber before.
Thanks for clarifying that, Catherine. Thank you. I've had another one here coming from Stella. You mentioned possible support for vaping coming in the future. What about the oral nicotine pouches that are the latest fad for teenagers? Catherine, maybe I can pass back to you for that one, because you're the one that obviously develops these services.
Yeah, so again, I think vaping's been asked many a time, what about vaping? So there's not been, as far as I'm aware, a national decision on how to approach vaping yet, and I think probably these nicotine pouches and things like that all come under sort of alternative products containing nicotine. So it is being looked at, but there's no decision at the moment. So as Sarah said at the very start, at the moment it's for only those smoking tobacco. Thinking back a long time ago, I had a question about heated tobacco sticks, and they do count as tobacco products. So they were all right. I asked a question a good few months ago about that one, but anything else than that, if they're not sort of inhaling tobacco, then it's not eligible for the service at the moment. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Catherine. Gordon?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Are individuals temporarily registered with a GP practicing in Scotland eligible under the PGD? The PGD does state the patient has to be registered with the GP practice in Scotland, but you are looking at a 12-week programme anyway. So if somebody turned up and they're only going to be there for a couple of weeks, then it wouldn't be something which they would be eligible for, but it is finer detail. It does specifically say registered with a GP in Scotland. Catherine, I don't know if you've got any further detail on that.
I think I need to go and check that one, actually. That's not something that was necessarily came up in conversation. I think you're right. It depends, I suppose, on how long they're going to be a temporary resident for. But I think it's probably better I can go in and check that one out and we can get the answer back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine, thanks, Gordon. Adam?
Oh, yeah, so I've got one in from Gordon who's asking around about the different pack sizes and is the expectation to split the pack to make the smaller supplies week to week. That certainly was the case with the older PGD, and that would be the case now. The difference with the sort of either 1 milligram or half milligram packs is that they can be claimed as split packs for smaller quantities, whereas the titration pack itself can't be. It's a whole pack, and that's part of the reason it has to be given all at once is the 2-week supply. So yes, that would be the case. And then I suppose if you end up with any splits that you're not going to end up using, and they would look into whether broken bulk and whatnot can be claimed on them, which is probably on the fringes.
That's great, Adam. Thank you. We've had another question come in here. So the question is, if an attempt with Varenicline is unsuccessful and the patient wants to restart a quit attempt quickly, perhaps after a break of a week or a fortnight, do we start with a supply of an initiation pack again, or do we start with the 1 milligram twice a day dose? So I would say we're following the PGD, and the PG clearly states that we need to start with an initiation period. I would say if there's been a break, then the patient will want to start again from the 0.5 milligram tablets, just to avoid any sort of side effects that may come up. We do know that the 1 milligram tablets can come with side effects that people find difficult to tolerate. So obviously we would always recommend to start with the lower dose and work their way up. So I would say if you're ever in doubt, follow the PGD and what it recommends. Okay, any other questions, folks? Adam.
Yeah, sure. That's probably one of the last ones that came in there, and about asking about the side effects normally associated with varenicline subside with time. How soon after starting the treatment do they usually appear? And then how long do we wait before trialling the lower dose? So that's very much going to be a patient-specific thing. I would suggest, and the key word is whether the side effects are tolerable or not. They can subside in some people, and it's just a matter of getting through them. Some people, they don't subside, but they can cope with them through the course of treatment. So it's very much about what matters most to the patient, and then of course on balance with is the lower dose doing the trick. So you're not going to get a black and white answer to that one for the person putting the question forward. It's very much to do with the patient at hand.
Thanks, Adam. Catherine, sorry, I saw you had your hand up quickly there. Was that just a...
Yeah, it was just for that one.
Yeah, great. Okay. Jill?
Yep, so there's another one here. Is there a limit to the number of attempts in a specific time frame? And according to the PGD, there's not any limits in place. Happy to be challenged on that one, but
you're right, Jill. What we would always say for the entire service, regardless of whether it's Varenicline, NRT, or you're just giving behavioural support for these people that you're supporting, if you've got really sort of repeated struggles with getting through it and treatment failure for whatever, you should always be considering at each point whether this person is better supported by the specialist with your local quit your way service if your health board has got one. So you're technically absolutely spot on, Jill. Can't disagree with that. It's all about getting the patient to the right place. We know that on average it takes a good number of quit attempts before a habit can finally be kicked. But that is a question I think that we should be encouraging everyone to be asking themselves as they go along with each individual patient. Are these circumstances showing that actually they need a bit more input, a bit more frequent input, a bit more time spent with them, or a bit more expertise? So I think the answer, yes, technically is there's no real limit, but I think just that caveat of making sure that you're doing right by them.
Great advice, Adam. Thank you. Okay, I think the questions are slowing. Oh, sorry, spoke too soon. Gordon, do you want to come in? You're on mute, I'm afraid.
I knew I'd do it at some point. Do we still check in with the patient face-to-face halfway through the initiation pack and measure carbon monoxide levels? Yeah, I mean, you're seeing the patient every week, even though you're giving them the initiation pack at the start, or you'll give them the full pack at the start. You would still see them after 1 week to see how they're getting on as well. And you would be advised to take carbon monoxide readings weekly if you can, but certainly at least on the 0, 4 and 12 weeks. But I think it would be good practice to do it weekly anyway. You've got the patient there, why wouldn't you really? So, and it can provide a good motivation for the patient as well. Adam, you want to come in on that, or is it a separate point?
It's a separate one, Gordon, but
sorry, okay.
Can't disagree with you.
Okay, I'll pass it over to you anyway then, Adam.
No worries. So that's Sandra coming in with a question around about people who work offshore for several weeks. Always gave NRT in the past. Is it okay to use professional judgment there? And I'm assuming that that's around about with the sort of duration of treatment that you're giving them any given time. So yeah, the PGD is entirely set up for a weekly supply, but the use of the word normally, I think, is in there, gives us a bit of scope there to support patients with their individual circumstances. And I think as the professional who's operating under that PGD, you just need to knowingly be taking on any sort of additional risk that you might foresee in making that sort of longer supply. I mean, it's a fairly well established medication, reasonably tolerable side effect profile, but you need to be accepting that you're not doing those by not having those check-in points necessarily, that you'd be taking on the risk of doing that. But yeah, technically, unless Catherine, you're going to come in and clip me over the ear for suggesting that that's okay, the PGD, I think, intentionally has got that word normally should be in weekly supply for good reason.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if it started to look and the data was coming in and there was lots of 2, 3, 4 week supplies coming in, you'd start to question. But we get that individuals need the support that helps them best for their smoking cessation. So it would be professional judgment whether you wanted to do that or not. Thanks, Adam.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I think the questions are slowing, but in order to give folk a bit of time just to think up any last minute ones that you may have, I'll move on to the next slide because we've just got a bit of a summary here based on everything we've spoke about tonight. So hopefully you can see that slide's moved on now to number 16 for those that are following separately. So some takeaway points. For the whole service to work smoothly and for the long-term outcomes to be met and evidenced well, all three components of the service must be equally prioritised. So those three components are the service specification in PGD, the PCR, and the training. So in order to be able to deliver the PGD and the service well, you need to have been able to thoroughly look and complete the training requirements in order to be able to record correctly on the PCR. Then you need to have delivered the service well in the first place, and then it goes back to what Catherine was saying right at the start. We understand the PCR can be a complex beast to work, but NES are certainly doing a whole host of work at the minute to look to digest the PCR a wee bit more simply for everybody out there, and that takes us back to training, which will be coming out from NES, some guided modules and I believe some videos possibly as well. Hopefully that's not top secret and I'm not allowed to have said that, but I believe that's what the NES team are working on, to kind of give a guided tour through the PCR. So when that becomes available, we will certainly let you all know about it. So that's just some takeaway points from tonight. If there's any other questions that have come in that 2-minute window that I have spoke for, then we can address them now. Luke. Let's see. Can't remember. So Nikki, you've said, I can't remember exactly what the wording was for the Champix, but the patient was advised to continue to smoke until on the full strength is the same for generic service. So the PGD basically says to support the patient in the first couple of weeks and obviously deliver that initiation pack. And the way that, as you'll know, the way that the medication works, it starts to make people almost be repulsed by smoking. So I think naturally the patient stops smoking themselves, but as we know, with the first couple of weeks of any of the smoking services that people can choose to go on to, there is still that period of time where they may reach for a cigarette. So it's not something that somebody should be penalised about, but again, with that sort of additional motivational behavioural support, hopefully they can get off the cigarettes as quickly as possible. And Varenicline's obviously been proven to be effective in helping them to do that through the way it works in our brain chemistry. So hopefully that answers your question. But anything we've said tonight is also covered in lots of detail within that excellent NES TURAS module that is the compulsory training. So make sure you get some time to go through that. And yeah, like I said, I did it and learned a lot from it. Adam?
Yeah, no, I think it's funny actually, as Nikki's put that. I think I can't remember the exact wording, but I do recall it all almost being worded as if like they need to keep smoking until they're on the full strength. I think it's very much set a quick date. You may still be smoking up to that point. You may not get that effect that you were talking about, Sarah, until you kind of get to that sort of established state. But if the patient actually goes, do you know what? Hey, I don't feel like it, and then they stop smoking, there's no clinical risk, there's no risk to the patient. It doesn't mean anything for the service specification or any change you should make to the medication. I do actually remember that it was a bit bizarre, and I think there's a good reason that's been taken out, because it was almost misleading.
Thanks, Adam. Gordon?
Yeah, just in the PGD, just to clarify that point, individuals should set a quit date for 7 to 14 days after the initiation of treatment. So that is the idea based on the theory that Sarah said there, and Adam clarified. Yeah, so you're talking about the second week, that you would set a quit date for and aim for that.
That's great. Thanks for clarifying that, Gordon. That's really helpful. Okay. Any more for any more? Conscious of people's times, don't want to overrun if we don't need to. Oh, actually, sorry, hold on. Melissa, quit date during the second week, question mark. Yeah, so hopefully what Gordon's just said has clarified that point there as well for you. It's detailed in the PGD, so you can always refer to that as well. Okay. Well, look, everybody, thank you so much. That's been just slightly over an hour of your glorious Wednesday evening. Appreciate this is national, so the sun's maybe not been shining everywhere in Scotland today, but it very much has been here where I'm based in Edinburgh. So appreciate everyone that's taken the time to attend, and yeah, for your contribution. These things always work well when the audience is engaged and you actually give us questions to answer. So thank you so much to everyone that has contributed and attended. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening, and keep an eye out for the video coming out, which Robbie will work his magic on to edit and get sent out to you by the end of this week. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time, hopefully.